I spent over 1,000 hours vibe coding, aka prompt driven development, PDD. And as you guys can see here, we've got a couple of the tools that we're all very familiar with. One that you guys might not be so familiar with, which is Visual Studio Code. It actually does now have an agent mode. So I've used both Lovable, Cursor, and Studio Code to use it for agent based development, aka vibe coding, aka prompt driven development. So let's get into it and let me show you what I've learned over those hours. Let's talk about Lovable. It is a really, really awesome tool. And you guys can see here, their tagline here, it says idea to app in seconds. And it literally does what it's promising. You can put in some sort of a prompt. If you wanted to, you can start with a PRD, whichever method you want to use. But straight off the bat, once you put this prompt in, it will go ahead and develop your front end code. I think they're starting to get more into the back end as well. But I've stopped using Lovable for one main reason. And that reason is the fact that their apps that are developed are all in Vite framework, which is not the framework of my choice. I prefer to build my apps in Next.js, Next.js 15, React 18 or 19, Chatcn, Tailwind, and so on. So as cool as this tool is, and there's some really nice features within Lovable that I do like, I have decided to move away from it because it develops all its apps in Vite instead of Next.js. So really cool tool. I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of YouTube videos featuring Lovable, but I've moved on, and as great it is as it is no longer part of my toolkit for vibe coding. So let's move on to the next platform. Bolt.new. Um, I believe Bolt came out before Cursor did, and this is sort of my tool of choice at the moment in terms of the front end development. As you guys can see here in the bottom portion of this page, Bolt actually can develop in a lot of different frameworks. And so you've got here Svelte, Vue, I believe, Angular, and my framework of choice, which is Next.js. So um, this is one of the main reasons I've decided to move away from Lovable into Bolt, and start here in terms of the front end development and then move over to Cursor once I'm ready to do some more of the functionality pieces. I find that both Cursor and Bolt are great at the front end pieces, but as you want to start going into functionality development, for example, authentication, whether it's Supabase or auth.js or Clerk, etc., or Stripe integration. I know that they're saying that Stripe is now integrated, but the ability to do more sort of fine-tuned development, if you will, is a lot better once you actually move out from Bolt or Lovable into your IDE of choice. And your IDE will either be Visual Studio Code or Cursor in this case. So Bolt is really getting good. Really appreciate the whole ecosystem they've also built with Bolt.new, which comes with a self-hosted version of Bolt.diy, and then its integration with its Stack Blitz capabilities, which is more of a Vercel slash Netlify type of um, ecosystem, if you will. All right, so let's move on. Okay, the next tool we're going to talk about is Visual Studio Code. I've been using Visual Studio Code for many, many, many years to do all my programming, whether it was Python or Next.js. And for the past couple of months, especially since Lovable and Cursor and those types of tools have come out, the agent-based development tools slash IDEs, Visual Studio Code or Microsoft has done a lot of work to try and catch up, and they're getting really good. Not as sort of automated as some of these other tools, but definitely on the right path. And so they've had a version called Visual Studio Code Insiders for quite some time. And now I think in the last week or so, have upgraded the main Visual Studio Code version with agent mode enabled. And there are a lot of really cool tools within that. I'm not going to go super detailed into each of these tools, but I do want to just kind of give you an overview of the things I've learned with each of these tools and then see where we end up in showing you some examples and how I actually use these tools to develop the applications and also websites. So let's talk about Cursor. For several months, actually, I started with Cursor back many versions back ago, and then I decided that there were some limitations, and so I moved over to Microsoft Visual Studio Code. Went through that whole cycle. uh, but I decided to come back to Cursor for one main reason, which is that with Visual Studio Code, I kept hitting rate limits um, with the LLMs that they were offering. I wasn't able to keep developing within Microsoft Visual Studio Code, while versus within Cursor now, there's a really cool setting that allows me to keep coding without hitting any rate limits and also not having to put my own LLM API keys into it. So with Visual Studio Code, if I did put my API keys in and use some of my own tokens, but that started to rack up very quickly and it really didn't make sense. And so I figured out that with Cursor and its one really nifty little setting now, you can sort of keep developing without having to hit any rate limits. And within the $20 a month account of Cursor, I'm able to develop at quite a good pace. And so that's kind of been the key. And the feature that is available here in Cursor is the agent selector or the LLM selector within Cursor has now a auto selection mode where based on the models that you've selected, it can choose between those and jump. I'm assuming it's jumping between those models as it's developing so that you're not hitting rate limits. There's no sort of slowdown in your development process because it's just going to keep going and it's doing a really good job of doing that. So I'm back to Cursor and I've been testing it for quite some time and it's running really well and I've been very happy with the results so far. So let me now show you guys how I actually approach creating an app or a website, and it really starts with the PRD. And I use a custom GPT or a GPT on OpenAI, ChatGPT, that really does a good job of helping to create PRDs based on just very little input that you might give in. So I'm going to go ahead and run through a full cycle, show you guys how I create the PRD, and then jump into Bolt to create front end, and then go through that process where I'm going from PRD to front end and into Cursor at the end to develop some of the other functionalities that I would like to add into the system. So here we go. So this is where the entire journey begins in terms of your vibe coding, again, aka PDD. So I found this GPT quite some time ago. It's called Chat PRD, and it's an AI for product managers. So you guys can see here that, let me see if I can zoom in on this. So here we go. So, it's got some default sort of prompts you can put in, but I have already put in a prompt here. It says, I want to create a microsite that generates tooltips for N8N. It should have the n8n.io website as well as the N8N forum data as part of the knowledge base to generate tooltips. Users can add their email for daily N8N tooltips. There'll also be a resource section, maybe for workflow templates. I also want to put a community section that will promote the Watt AI community. And then I say, ask me clarifying questions to make this PRD better. So let's get this started. Awesome idea. Boom, boom, boom. So it's doing its thing. It's going through asking you a lot of the questions. So I'm going to pause the video here and give it some more details so that I can show you guys the final PRD. So let me pause this and I'll be right back. I'm back. So we have the full PRD here. As you guys can see, went back and forth a little bit and made some updates to the questions that it was asking. Here we go. Got the full sort of experience here, user stories, etc., and some technical details. All right, so this is looking pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and go to the next step. Looks like it messed up on the file tree a little bit, but either way, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next step, and then I'll show you how to get this started within Bolt so that we can move that over to Cursor for some additional updates. Before we jump into Bolt, I do want to show you guys how this might look like if we were to do this in Lovable. So basically copy and pasted the PRD info from ChatGPT into this window. And what happens once we do that? I'll be right back. Lovable has finished creating the first version. So you guys can see here a little bit of positive affirmation, and then it's gonna sort of parse the PRD and figured out what to do. No additional input from me. And as you guys can see here, named it the N8N Tip Genius. It's got a tip archive, which all works. Got the workflows. Got the join the community section, which is supposed to go elsewhere. So here we go. You can say get a tip, daily tip, tip archive, all available on the home page. Got the community piece, and then sign up for the daily tips. Great. Okay. Cool. So that was Lovable, and then I'm going to go ahead and start the same process using Bolt.new. I'll be right back. In Bolt.new, and as you guys can see here, this is a similar starting point with Lovable, but the difference here is that down here, as you guys can see, we've got Astro, Vite, Next.js, NativeScript, and so on. So I want to start with the Next.js app. I can either start with a blank app here and then update my prompt, but I'm going to go ahead and actually just do the same thing that I did with Lovable and see how it performs. So let me go get that prompt. I'll be right back. Okay, here we are. So we've got the prompt in the prompt window for Bolt.new, or I'll just say Bolt. So same information I gave it to Lovable. So let's see what it does. Boom, get this started. And I'll be right back once the results are ready. So you guys can see here one of the differences with Bolt versus Lovable is that it actually goes into this code interface right off the bat versus Lovable. It actually does everything in the background and doesn't show you any of the code as it is developing. So this is a pretty nice way to look at it. And as you can see here, because the PRD identified Next.js as the framework to use for the app, it actually started to do that. So let me come back once it's done processing and I'll show you what the results look like. Okay, after a little bit of adjustment, we finally have a preview ready to go. And you can see here, this was sort of the first step that Bolt took. Not as much positive reinforcement as Lovable, but here you guys can see that this again, created the proper structure for a Next.js app. Went through all of these steps here. You can sort of follow along as it's happening. Um, some details here that have happened. And so this is where what I said earlier kind of comes into play, where both Lovable and Bolt, I think, do a great job more on the front end. But then as soon as you start to go into certain components, so for example here, because the PRD asked for post hoc for some of the analytics capabilities it offers, it wasn't able to preview and compile the full app because of the missing sort of variables for post hoc. So I had to go ahead and take an extra step and disable post hoc. And then once it actually did that and removed post hoc, it was actually able to finally uh, do a dev run for the website. And so you can see here that if I go to preview, we do finally have a website that's ready to go. Any then tips, not as creative as Lovable in sort of the naming of things, but this one actually built in its own sort of theme switcher, which I didn't even ask for, right? So you can see here that that works. It's got the tips, and then got an archive. Today's tips archive. It's interesting it added its own little share or save. That's cool. 2 pages. Got the workflow templates. Again, this did a pretty good job in compared to the Lovable version. Let's see. So with the with Lovable, you guys can switch from dev mode to preview mode up here versus with Bolt, it's got a different way of switching it back and forth. So okay, so it did do similar things. All right, so let's go back to Bolt. Subscribe again. This isn't as refined, I think, as the Lovable version, but the fact that this is in Next.js versus here, if I go to the dev mode, you guys can see this is all Vite, and it's confirmed down here with the Vite config file. So that's the big difference. So let's go ahead and do this. Within here, I can go ahead and download this file, or I can deploy this and it'll create a temporary Netlify URL for you. So let me deploy this and then show you what that looks like. So we have successfully deployed this to Netlify. You guys can see here, this does provide you with a temporary URL. You can go ahead and set up your own using this link, but let's see what the temporary site looks like. Cool. Any then tips? Got the pretty much the same interface. Everything is live again. I think this needs some refinement, but on a first draft, it looks pretty good. Let's see if it does create a tip for you. That one failed. So that failed. But then here, what I did in Lovable is I did go ahead and push this publish button, and it actually created the site, right? So you've got n8n tipgenius.lovable.app. So let's try doing the same thing here. Oh, look at that. On the Lovable version, we actually got a successful create here. So that's pretty interesting. Nice. Okay, cool. So you guys can see here we're doing sort of um, apples to apples comparison. But next step I'll take is I'm going to go ahead and bring this into actually, let me do this before I do that. I'm going to give it an extra step where we're going to refine this visual a little bit, and I'll show you what I'm going to do next. All right, so what I did was I went to the N8N website, which has a really nice new look and feel and overall design. You guys can see here, really awesome job of updating the site. So within Bolt, I took the screenshot, added it here, and I'm going to ask it to update the look and feel, sort of mimicking the website. So let's see what happens once I do that. I'll be right back. All right. So again, what I did was I gave it the URL or the image of the new website, And you guys can see here, it went through the whole process and updated a bunch of the pages. And here we have the updated new look and feel. Does a much better job of making it more visually appealing. And you can see here that this applied that look and feel throughout the whole page, not just a section of it. Here's the difference where I think Bolt does a better job, because I did Lovable, and you guys can see here that within Lovable, it did a decent job with the top part, but then it didn't really do anything with the rest of the look and feel. So I think in this case, Bolt does a better job of it. So, all right. So now you have a site, right? You have the site kind of in place, um, but you want to do more. So now we got to move over to Cursor to do some additional work. So what I'm going to do is, instead of deploying this again, I'm going to go ahead and actually export this so that I can bring it to Cursor and continue to do some more work on this. And I will be back. Okay, we are here in the cursor interface. And so what you guys are looking at here on this left side is a portion of the cursor setup. So you can see here, we have the full interface where I've brought in the Next.js version from Bolt. And then now I'm just kind of going in and refining things inside of the app setup itself, where, for example, Bolt creates the Next.js in a version 13.5, which is a few iterations back. So I spent a little bit of time updating it to Next.js 15, as well as to React 18, those packages. And so right now I'm in the process of setting up the resend capability, which is the email sender. It's a very popular package that people are using, developers are using to send out email. So I'm just in the process of doing that. And here on the right side is just the local dev of this app as things are being updated. So I kind of wanted to show you guys the really one cool feature in Cursor that has kind of helped me to move back to Cursor, which is this auto mode here. So we are in agent mode down here. And then here in auto mode, you can see that there are a bunch of other models available, but because I've set it to auto select, Cursor is going to pick those models for me as it's working on these tasks. If you wanted more sort of thinking and reasoning for some of your tasks, you can turn on thinking. However, by turning on thinking, that means that you are now isolated to one model. And so, depending on what level of account you have with Cursor, that may sort of use up more of your limits versus just going to auto select. So far, that's been working. So I will keep it there, and I'm going to just kind of keep refining this so that you guys can see the app once it's actually ready to go. I'll be back. Okay, and before we do that, let me show you the options that are available within Cursor. So obviously, we're going to do a lot of stuff in agent mode, but you do have ask in manual mode. I'm not quite sure what manual here does. Yeah, I don't want to play around with that, but you can here under agent, go ahead and pick the model. You can set it to auto run and auto fix errors, which I think we'll want to do, especially because you want those that you want it to sort of run on its own without having to prompt you to do, to stop and do something else every once in a while. So we'll keep that there. And then the other thing here is that you have, as I mentioned earlier in this video, you have the option to auto select, and by auto selecting, it's going to choose between these models that you've made available to the agent. And I've sort of deselected all of the models and only chose some of the more recent ones, as well as the better models for programming that I am aware of. So some of these max item models do charge you if you run them. So just be aware of the costs. So I've now deselected auto select as well as thinking, and have selected GPT 4.1. And 4.1 just recently came out. I think something like this week. Was it this week? Anyway, not more than a week since its launch into OpenAI, but you can see here that within Cursor, it's already available. And I have to tell you that 4.1 is an amazing model when it comes to coding. And the speed at which it is programming is just phenomenal. I've also tested O3 and O4 Mini, which just came. I think those were announced yesterday. So OpenAI is doing a great job of publishing these models, and we get to take advantage of them as we're using these tools. So please go and test these out. If you're doing a lot of sort of Cursor or Microsoft Visual Studio Code, or some of these other tools that we're also talking about here in this video. So 4.1 is my go-to as of now, and I just want to show you guys how to make those selections within Cursor in order for you to have that available to you. Let me show you also some of the settings that I'm currently running. So let's go to the next section. Okay, let's take a look at some of the Cursor settings that are available here. This is the starting point, obviously your account. If you guys want to go into the editor settings, you can, determine the font sizes and things like that, but let's not mess with that for now. So I think one of the important things you want to set is to enable private mode, so that all of your prompts and code and things like that are not shared. Obviously that's a personal preference, but I typically tend to turn those off. If we go into the features, here we obviously want Cursor to be running. Accept the next word of suggestion. Okay, partial accepts, suggestions and commands. You can read through these guys and then determine what's best for you. Obviously we want agent mode. That's what I prefer. So automatically create new chat after an activity when opening the chat page. Sure. I'll scroll to bottom. I have a bunch of commands that I am allowing the AI agent to run, and these sort of have grown over time as I'm developing, but some of these are pretty standard, like build and dev, things like that. You can also add a deny list. I've deselected these so that I am pretty comfortable letting the AI delete the files, modify dot files, and things like that. And large context, I think you definitely want this open, right? So as you are using more and more code and files, I think having that larger context helps. But keep in mind, GPT 4.1 has a 1 million token context window. Yeah, if you start to exceed that, you're doing something either good or bad. This has helped me a lot here, this play on sound, so that I know when things are done as the AI is running. This is super handy, the web search tool. So if you put in a link, let's say to a documentation or whatever, it'll go and fetch that and inform itself, right? And so this, and then the code-based indexing is part of the context window. So you definitely want that to be updated. As you guys can see here, I've added a bunch of documentation links for the platforms that I use and are typically developing in it. So make sure that these are updated and properly indexed. Let's see, show, yeah, some additional settings. I didn't really touch these, I don't think. Terminal, okay, so there's that. And then as I showed you just previously, here are all the models available. You can add your own keys, but you don't really need to do that, especially with some of these newer models. So we've got the newer O3 and O4 and mini versions. I've deselected O1, that's a little bit older. I don't know how well Grok performs. I've turned all those off. 4.0 is kind of older as well. 4.5, they do charge you for this if you're going to run it. 4.1 is the cream of the crop, at least for me as of now. Got some Gemini versions, DeepSeek, and the Cursor and Claude models. So with this setting, if you did choose to use the auto select, I think you're gonna, I mean, I think you'll be pretty fine, but I really like the speed at which 4.1 runs. So I'm gonna stick with that for now. Here are a bunch of rules, right? So these are rules that I've gathered over time. There's some specific rules, especially for the MPC that I am running, that I will show you guys in a little bit. So Google, go and Google cursor, awesome cursor rules, and you find a GitHub repo that has a plethora of cursor rules that you can apply to whatever app that you're building. So go and do that. Make sure that you have the right set of rules for the type of app or website you are building. And here we have the MPC servers. And if you guys don't know, MPC is a protocol that Anthropic has created, and it's sort of taking over the AI world right now. So it stands for Model Context Protocol. Supabase just released one. And guys, if you're using Supabase for your project, and in this one, I'm not currently using it, so it's disabled, but if you are using Supabase, highly, highly recommend getting this MCP server installed. And then the other one I'm really, really excited about and I'm using, will use for every single project going forward, is called Master AI. What this MCP does, or what this tool does, is if you give it a PRD, like we did, we created one earlier, right, for this app we're building. If you give it a PRD, it's going to break that up into a set of tasks and subtasks, and then it's going to follow that order as it's developing the app. And I'll show you guys that here in a little bit. But these two are sort of really great tools. You don't need the Brave anymore because the web search is already included in Cursor. So those are my current MCP servers. Update frequency, craft and share. Yeah, so this is pretty good. We're all good to go. So those are the Cursor settings that I'm currently running. Hopefully you guys have a good understanding of what that does for you. And let's go and talk about Taskmaster AI in that MCP server. Okay, so this is the Taskmaster AI that was created by this developer. I'm not going to mess up his pronunciation. So this is a URL. I'll add that link in the description as well, because I think you guys will definitely want to try and run this within your development environment. So as you can see, this can be used with Cursor, Lovable, Windsurf, Row, and others. So as you know, as I'm currently using Cursor, I did go ahead and get this installed, and I will show you what it does once it is installed. So this is one of the projects I'm currently working on, and you guys can see here that we do have the Taskmaster AI enabled as an MCP server. This also adds a bunch of cursor rules specific to Taskmaster. And so you'll see that in this .cursor folder with the rules. So that'll automatically add that once you initiate the Taskmaster. And so I'm not going to go into sort of super detail on how to get this initiated or installed, but you can see here that we have all these commands available to us. And so the way you start this is by taking a PRD, right? And so in this case, I wanted to implement MDX into this website project where I can edit the content using MDX and sort of separate out the content from the page level code, right? And so you can see here in this content folder that, you know, I've already implemented this, but you can see here, wrong window, you can see here I have all these MDX files for the content. So this PRD was a breakdown of what needed to happen in order to create the MDX. And so here we start with the PRD, and then once I run the project initiation with the Taskmaster AI MCP server, it's going to create a folder called tasks. And this will create a tasks.json file. And you can see that, you know, this has taken It's reviewed the PRD that you just saw, parsed it, and set up a bunch of tasks here, in this case, 10 separate tasks with subtasks. And what the MCP server will do is read the task, break it down, analyze it, and sort of create this, you see this like detailed plan of it, right? And so as it's going through, it's going to create all of these and basically give you an organized method in which the AI can develop your product and or app, right? So I would, hopefully that gives you an idea what'll happen, but I highly recommend taking a look at Taskmaster so that as a methodology, you're always starting with a PRD, and it could be for the entire app or it could be for a function. Here in this example, we did it just for a function where I'm trying to create an MDX capability for the website. So take a look at Taskmaster. Again, I'll put that link in the description for you guys to be able to review that. Now let's jump to the app that we've been building and show you where I ended up. Okay, after I brought this app, the NA Daily Tips app, into Cursor, I spent a few hours fine-tuning it, adding some capabilities. For example, I added the, instead of using Supabase, I'm using auth.js, which is formerly known as NextAuth, for some authentication, because what I also added was a admin section to be able to see the number of subscribers, and also add and be able to delete or edit subscribers that are in the database. And I'm using Prisma for the schema. I'm using SQLite as a local database file. So you guys can see here that in this data folder, we have admin and subscriber. So we have these data files available to us. We also have an admin section, again, to be able to manage the users, and it's using proper authentication that are set in the environment variables. We also have API endpoints for some of the things that it's doing, capabilities that are in the app. So all of this was, again, added into the Bolt version, right? So I couldn't necessarily do all this within Bolt. I don't think that's a very good use of your tokens. I would say that within Bolt, you want to use those tokens that are available to sort of figure out the front end piece, the overall design, and have Bolt create the front end components for you, right? And so once that's all done, you definitely want to bring it into Cursor and get that more production ready. So let me show you where we ended up. Again, I spent quite a few hours sort of fine tuning it, tweaking things, making sure that, you know, the global settings, as well as the various dependencies and packages, as you guys can see here, those are all sort of updated and matching to what I know to be a good set of working packages and so on. So let's go into and show you what the final result here is. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to comment within this section. Also, my email is available in the description and about us. So yeah, let me know how you guys are going to use these various tools that are available to us to keep developing your apps. There's really no excuse for you not to be able to create your own apps at this point. It's becoming so much better and easier to do these things. Again, once you want to get to production, it is a little bit tougher. You do need to know what needs to be done, but those are, I think, challenges that just overall help you to be a better developer, possibly solopreneur, or and so on. So let's jump into the actual app. All right, so here is the the final version, I guess. Not quite final, but at least the refined version. I went ahead and removed the community and workflow templates, and also sort of fine-tuned the overall spacing of things. I refined the daily tip card. I also refined sort of how these cards are looking, and then enable the email sending. So let's start at the top where you say, hey, just, you know, can I get an actual tip? Yep.
this generation works. We have a little sonar tip notification here that works, disappeared, right? And we got the daily tip. We also have the ability to share this. So if I click this, it'll actually generate the URL so for the individual. So if I click on this, you guys can see if I go to this, the individual tip page also should be created. Let's see. Taking a while. It's running on localhost, so maybe that's why. All right, so we got the daily tip. Nope, that didn't work. Okay. Well, let's try the email. Okay, so we have the, great. So the pagination works. Let's try this email. Awesome. I've subscribed and got a little notification. That was a little fast, but now I should have the email. So let's see what that looks like. Awesome. So you guys can see here, I did get the email, right, from the system saying that I've subscribed and I should be expecting a daily email from the system. So that's working. Okay, so the daily tip sharing looks like it's not working, but let me check one more time here. See if this sharing piece works. Let's copy that. Try this. Might be an issue with the daily tip sharing. Oh, okay. Great. So you can see here the archive tips and sharing works and it's nicely handled. So we got a unique URL for the individual tips, and for this screen you can keep signing up if you happen to get a shared version. So awesome. As I mentioned, I did create a admin section for this so that at least you can see who's signed up and without having to go to the database level. So let's sign me in here. Sample.com. So you can see that the authentication piece does actually work. If I go to the user section, okay, so we are now logged in and you can see that on the dashboard, it's just showing you the latest signups using some dummy data. We've got some users here, the settings. I didn't really do much with it. It's a placeholder in case you wanted to put something there. But you can go ahead and edit this and change this information out, right? It's a little bit buggy, but at least you have an admin section to be able to look at who's there. But again, I don't think I could have really done the admin section using Bolt. And this is an example where to add some real capabilities into your project, you'd want to bring it into Cursor or some other IDE so that you have more development capabilities versus just pure sort of first shot, second shot type of coding of the look and feel. So all in all, you can see here that going from PRD within OpenAI over to Bolt and Lovable, if you choose to use Lovable, I mean, by all means, please. But again, my personal preference is to stay in Next.js, and so we're gonna keep with Bolt. Take that PRD, put it into the prompt, let it sort of do its thing, create the visual front end. As you guys saw, you can add screenshots of desired look and feels for whatever app or website you might be building, and then migrate that over to Cursor so you can do the fine tuning of things. And so here in this app, I think, there's a few little bugs still, but overall, great sort of initial development of this app. I think I want to tie it to some N8N workflows for the content generation piece of it so that I can maybe put the N8N website and some of the workflows and things like that into a vector database to be able to actually generate these tips for you. So hopefully that helps you to understand what this vibe coding methodology and process might look like. give you some insights into the various tools that are available to us. And keep on coding. We'll see you guys later. Bye.